Hey guys, JamesMCD Reviews here. Welcome to another catch-up review covering all the movies I saw in February and March. ISS is directed by Gabriela Cuprethwaite and is about a group of Americans and Russians aboard the ISS who get caught in the middle of a nuclear fallout with instructions to execute the other. Trust me, it's a lot less enthralling than it sounds. For a movie with such a solid concept, I was shocked at how boring this movie is. The movie is only an hour 30, but it moves incredibly slowly and nothing really hooks you in. The characters are some of the dumbest people on board this ship. The effects are a bit of a mixed bag. The zero gravity stuff looks cool, but some of the exterior shots look embarrassingly fake. Also, I don't know if this was the movie, my eyes bugging out, or a bit of both, but did it feel like the movie was lagging in parts? Let me know if that was just me. But yeah, bottom line, this movie was kinda lame. 2.5 out of 5. The Jungle Bunch, Operation Meltdown, is an English dub of a French animated film that is also one of 5 movies in a series. I had no clue what this was. I had no clue what this was doing in theaters. I just kinda wanted to see anything to keep me out of the house, so I said, sure, whatever. Maybe don't do that. This has no business being shown in a goddamn movie theater. This is bottom shelf dollar store material. The animation is cheap, the characters are all annoying, the plot is just bizarre, the humor is non-existent. 1 out of 5. Argyle is directed by Matthew Vaughn and is about a spy novelist who gets roped into a mission that ends up being a little too similar to her work. This is one of those movies where I agree with a lot of the criticism and I can completely understand people hating this movie, but for me personally, the genuinely fun elements of the film kept it above water for me. Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell are very likable and have good chemistry. There are some fun action scenes, despite the VFX looking hilariously bad. And the movie has a good sense of humor. But where it starts to fall apart is the story. I heard one guy as I was walking out say, "I'm confused," and that pretty much sums it up. This is a bloated, messy movie. The second act in particular gets insane, throwing twist after twist at you, to the point where it becomes incomprehensible. At the same time, I can't call it a completely bad movie either. There was a point where I kinda just surrendered to the stupidity and said, fuck it, what else have you got? And it became a much more enjoyable time. And not to get too personal, but I was looking for mindless distractions, and the genuinely fun parts of this movie were enough to keep me entertained. I'd say check it out if you're curious, just be prepared for a very muddled story. 3 out of 5. Orion and the Dark is a Netflix animated movie from DreamWorks about a kid who is terminally afraid of everything, who gets to spend the night with the literal embodiment of dark to help overcome his fears. Or at least, that's what it started out as. Yeah, this seems like a cute idea at first, but then they say that it's all a story being told by the kid grown up to his daughter, and then time travel is a thing somehow, and it kinda just loses the plot. It's almost like they started with the story of the kid overcoming his fears, but then it turned out it wasn't long enough to fill an hour and a half, so they had to overcomplicate the story to fill the runtime. I mean, regardless, it's a cute enough movie, the animation is nice, the voice acting is decent, there are some clever ideas, it just wasn't anything great. 3 out of 5. Lisa Frankenstein is directed by Robin Williams' daughter and is about a teenage girl who gets into a relationship with a zombie. From what I've seen, this has apparently been very hit or miss for a lot of people, but I had a lot of fun with it. I really like the aesthetic of this movie. Mixing a more gothic tone with bubblegum neon was a nice contrast. The cast across the board was really solid. Katherine Newton was great, and for Cole Sprouse to convey so much emotion and chemistry without saying anything is impressive. The movie had a lot of funny, out there scenes and ideas, but it kind of felt restricted by its rating. I feel like they could have explored this concept to its fullest and just gone completely insane with it if it was an R instead of PG-13. As is, it's pretty tame, but still fun. Nothing perfect, but worth checking out. 4 out of 5. Perfect Days is directed by Wim Wenders and follows the daily routine of a Tokyo custodian. We see him going from cleaning job to cleaning job, we see him taking breaks in between to relax and enjoy nature, and overall, we see a man gleefully content with the simple things in life. This is a very charming slice of life type movie. It's pretty evenly paced out, it has very simple and engaging characters, despite our lead barely saying anything, and it can actually be pretty poignant at times. Beautiful cinematography, great performances, 4 out of 5. Bob Marley One Love is directed by Ronaldo Marcus Green and is advertised as a biopic about Jamaican singer-songwriter Bob Marley. When it first starts out, it doesn't look like it'll follow the typical biopic format, as it's less about Bob Marley's life and more about his role in the outbreak of war in Jamaica as he prepares to play a peace concert. But as the movie goes on and it switches focus, it basically turns into a typical biopic, which is to say, good music, good performances, but ultimately nothing special. 3 out of 5. Stop Motion is a new horror movie from Shudder about a stop-motion animator's descent into madness as her latest movie starts to take over her mental state and ruin her life. I randomly stumbled across the trailer for this movie and I was intrigued by the concept. Centering a horror thriller around an exhausted animator trying to get over the death of her overbearing mom is really interesting, especially since stop motion can be creepy at times. When I actually watched it, I thought it had a very bizarre atmosphere. The titular stop motion looked great, and with it blurring the lines between what's real and what isn't, I didn't always know where it would go, but it kinda acted as a double-edged sword. At times it seemed like it was going for abstract creepiness over coherence, and some cases it worked better than others. The acting was kinda mixed, the pacing was kinda slow. It was an interesting watch, but nothing amazing. 3.5 out of 5. Drive Away Dolls is directed by Ethan Coen and is about two lesbian friends who go on a road trip to unwind and accidentally get wrapped up in criminal activity. While the movie wasn't as laugh-out-loud funny as the trailers made it out to be, I still had a decent time with it. The second act was definitely stronger than the first, and the reveal of what they're smuggling is pretty funny. The two leads have decent chemistry, and there are some bizarre, quirky editing choices. Again, not amazing, but pretty fun. 3.5 out of 5. Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba to the Hashira Training, is basically a compilation film showing the final episode of Season 3 and the first episode of Season 4. And I wish I knew that going in so that I wouldn't be confused as to why there were so many opening credit sequences and why the first act and the second act felt like two completely separate movies. Maybe that's just my own ignorance, but they probably could have advertised that better. I haven't seen past the first episode of Demon Slayer, so I can't really comment on what these episodes do for the overall story. I mean, as individual episodes, they're fine, they were interesting, the animation was pretty, save for the CGI, and the action was pretty cool, but stitched together as a movie, it's kind of muddled and incoherent. 3 out of 5. The Peasants is from the directors of Loving Vincent and is about a peasant girl named Yana who is just trying to live her best, most independent life while not only being forced into marrying a wealthy landowner, but also being scorned and abused by the rest of the village people. I found myself really underwhelmed by this movie after getting out. The best part is the animation. I don't know if it was all actually hand-painted frame by frame or if it was just very intense rotoscoping, but regardless, the colors, the shading, the cinematography looks gorgeous. There are some solid performances and a decent score, but that was kind of it. I wasn't really invested by the story and characters. I thought the ending was kind of unsatisfying and anticlimactic, and ultimately I was just kind of bored. 2.5 out of 5. They Shot the Piano Player is directed by Fernando Truba and Javier Mariscal, and stars Jeff Goldblum as an author who travels to Brazil looking for information about a famous musician who mysteriously disappeared. This one was alright. I liked the animation. It had a nice pop art feel to it. It was simplistic while still very vibrant. The voice acting was pretty solid, the score was decent, the story, while nothing amazing, was still engaging and seemingly very personal. Not great, but still worth a watch. 3 out of 5. Snack Shack is set in the early 90s and is about two kids who get a job at a poolside snack bar to earn money and have fun over the summer. This was a lot of fun. It feels very evocative of 80s and 90s shenanigans movies, but also has a lot of heart to it. The acting is great, the characters, while not the most likable, are still fun to watch. It had a lot of funny moments, but wasn't afraid to get really sad, and you do genuinely feel those moments. I'd definitely say check it out if you're curious. 4 out of 5. Kung Fu Panda 4 is the fourth chapter in the popular DreamWorks franchise. If you haven't checked out my bucket list video on the first 3 movies, definitely do so. While this isn't a bad movie, it is by far and away the worst of the Kung Fu Panda series. It fails to justify its own existence, and it neglects the adult audience by dumbing it down to an unfortunate degree. The humor is embarrassingly unfunny. The funniest parts of the movie is the budding romantic subplot between Poe's two dads. The new characters aren't really that interesting. While Awkwafina wasn't as annoying as she usually is, she still isn't great, and she doesn't have the best chemistry with Poe. The design of the villain is cool and Viola Davis gives a good performance, but she is a weak sauce villain when compared to the previous 3 movies. The animation is still great, particularly in the action scenes, and the music is really well done. I just wish the movie matched the same level of quality as the first 3. I know this is meant to start a new trilogy of Kung Fu Panda movies, but I honestly don't care to see them. I'm perfectly content with 3 being the last one. My current ranking is 3, but honestly, I feel like it's closer to a 2.5. Cabrini is from the studio that made Sound of Freedom and tells the real-life story of Mother Francesca Cabrini trying to convince the racist politicians of 1989 New York to give her funds to build hospitals and orphanages for the poor children. I wasn't exactly sure what to expect going into this, but coming out of it, it was pretty decent. Nothing amazing and nothing I would see again, but it was a solid movie. For being sort of an independent studio and probably not having the largest budget, the production production design and cinematography were really good. The acting for the most part was pretty solid, and the story was interesting, if a little predictable. I feel like the movie could have shaved off about 20 minutes and it still would have been fine, but other than that, I'd say check it out. And if anything, unlike Sound of Freedom, I didn't feel dirty after watching it. 3.5 out of 5. Imaginary is the second film from Blumhouse about a killer bear to be released in the last 5 months, and is about a woman trying to form a connection with her new stepdaughters while also being tortured by her childhood imaginary friend. This movie looked kind of interesting from the trailers, and there were some things that kind of worked, but on the surface, this is just another shitty Blumhouse horror movie. It substitutes building tension for cheap jump scares, the characters aren't that interesting, it doesn't do much with its themes of repressed memories beyond the surface level. There are some revelations toward the second act that pulled me back in briefly, but it didn't hold my attention for that long. 2.5 out of 5. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is the newest entry in the Ghost Corps universe and sees the Spengler family having to stop a 1,000-year-old entity from raising an army of ghosts and bringing about a frozen apocalypse. If you saw the video I did a couple years ago for TTFT, you know I'm kind of an expert when it comes to the Ghostbusters.
I'm not gonna let somebody from the fucking 90s tell me about the Ghostbusters. Hey man, I respect your opinion, but you're wrong.
And in my expert opinion, ranking this among the other films in the series, this one is dead in the middle. There are a lot of things it does right, mixed with a lot of things that annoyed the hell out of me. Overall, creating a fun but disposable experience. Filmmaking wise, the movie does a good job playing up the creep factor in a lot of scenes. The VFX look great, and I like that they're continuing to mix CG and practical effects. The acting was pretty solid, with McKenna Grace continuing to be the best thing in this entire series, and there was some legit funny moments. Unfortunately, the movie is also very bloated in terms of its plot and the rest of its cast. It strikes me that there are a lot of characters they just didn't know what to do with, and some that are basically reduced to cameos. While some of the humor was fine, most of it was really awkward and forced. And the movie has a similar problem that Ghostbusters 2 had, where it backpedals on a lot of story beats from the first movie, so that the characters are kind of back to square one. I get that Walter Peck is trying his hardest to shut the Ghostbusters down, but why are Callie and Gary so quick to shut Phoebe down? Why do we have to do the stupid, you're too young to be a Ghostbuster thing, when she is literally the reason you two are alive? Like I said, the movie wasn't bad, it just had a lot of frustrating aspects to it. I'd say check it out if you're curious, it's just not anything to write home about. That being said, if they don't bring back Rick Moranis for the next one, I'm not watching it. 3 out of 5. The Spider Within, a Spider-Verse story, is a short film set between the first and the second movie. It showcases Miles' exhaustion and stress over being Spider-Man that boils to the surface in a beautifully terrifying nightmare sequence. The short was released by Sony Animation in partnership with the Kevin Love Fund and their new mental health focused lesson plan. It ties into their mission, showing Miles neglecting his mental health at the beginning, but then finally working up the strength to open up to his dad. The short film on its own is pretty good. The story, while nothing major, works for what they're trying to teach. The animation is of course spectacular. Shamik Moore and Brian Tyree Henry reprise their roles and they do pretty good. And ultimately, I'm just glad to be getting any new Spider-Verse content, as it's looking like it'll be a while before Beyond comes out. The short is free to watch on YouTube, so definitely check it out and donate to their fundraiser as well. 4 out of 5. Godzilla x Kong: A New Empire is the newest entry in Legendary's Monsterverse. If you haven't watched my bucket list double feature on Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island, be sure to check that out. I make it very clear in that video that the Monsterverse is not really my thing. I respect it for what it is, I get some mild entertainment out of it, and that's pretty much the case for this movie too. I know there are going to be several comparisons to Godzilla Minus One, and while I do like a monster movie that can be a bit more grounded and emotionally resonant, I kind of respect this movie for being unapologetically stupid. I mean, the minute I saw that shot of the two of them running together at full speed, I just kind of threw my arms up and said, fuck it, what else you got? And the fight scenes are just as ridiculous in the rest of the movie. They are big, bombastic, over the top, and it was kind of awesome. This is much more of a Kong movie that features Godzilla, but I'm okay with that, because I really like Kong in these movies. The scenes with him and Mini Kong are cute, the scenes of him fighting Scar King are fun, and when he does finally team up with Godzilla, it is hilarious. The human characters are still just the human characters. There's this one that is just a walking awesome mix soundtrack, and he was kind of fun. Brian Tyree Henry was alright. The deaf girl from the last movie is back, and she gets some interesting development, but for the most part, the humans are just there to explain things. Overall, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of these movies, but I had fun with this for what it is. 3 out of 5. Also, since I started including bucket list entries in last month's Ketchup review, I figured I'd continue doing that going forward. Snowpiercer was directed by Bong Joon-ho and released in 2013. 2014 and takes place in a frozen over Earth where the last remaining survivors are placed in a class system aboard a perpetually moving train. Originally, I watched this as part of a Bong Joon-ho bucket list double feature to prepare for the release of Mickey 17, but then Warner Brothers moved Mickey 17 to January 2025, so I decided to just talk about Snowpiercer now and do the double feature next year. I'm still glad I watched it because it was really good. The production design and VFX looked great and made the world look very desolate. The cast was all great, with Chris Evans and Song Kang-ho being the standout. The premise made for a really interesting story, like Infinity Train but more dystopian. And overall, I definitely recommend it. 4 out of 5. Boss Baby was released in 2017 and stars Alec Baldwin as a baby. Do I even need to say anything else? I watched this for a project that I'm working on for my friend Mendy, and yeah, of course it's bad. The best parts are when it's cutting between the kid's imagination and the real world, but they never really stick to it, and they never specify how much is actually happening. 2 out of 5. The Omen was released in 1976 and directed by Richard Donner, and is about a politician who adopts a child named Damien, who he later finds out is the son of the devil. Originally, I was going to do an individual episode on this to coincide with the first Omen coming out, but not only did I run out of time, but I also ended up not really having a lot to say about it, so I just threw it in here. Ultimately, I thought the movie was fine. It had some decent shots, cool kills, a good score, and I liked that it wasn't as much of an Exorcist knockoff as I thought it would be. I just couldn't really find myself caring about what was going on. I was more bored watching it than anything. 3 out of 5. And that does it for this video. Let me know in the comments what you've been watching the last few months. Check out some of my other videos that I posted, and stay tuned for more coming soon.